Right on. Very excited. The debate that doesn't matter. We are still going. Let me just say again, in an election this close, and the last results decided by fewer than 50,000 votes, who's to say what matters and doesn't? I mean, even something that traditionally doesn't matter and probably doesn't matter for most people only has to matter for a handful of people for it to actually have an influence on the outcome of an election. In that spirit, why not talk to a guy who has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know? He is Michael Shure. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Thank you for rallying on a special post-debate day.
I haven't forgotten, Mark, that vice presidential debates don't matter, but let's engage on it. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
They started this debate in the oddest way. You can give me your general impressions in a second, but when I say the oddest way, I mean, first of all, as I've said a jillion times, they call them debates. They're not debates. They're TV shows. You've got 2 minutes to answer, how you would handle and everything from immigration to a preemptive strike on Iran. I mean, it was these are very complicated issues that require deep dives. Yet, of course, you don't have any time for that. And really what you're looking for is some kind of fractious exchange that can then go viral, et cetera. You didn't get any of those exchanges. In fact, you got a very sort of genial environment. But that said, I'm wondering how you processed it all, what your general thoughts were. And then, as I say, it did start right out of the chute. They dropped, you talk about baptism by fire. They dropped the governor from Minnesota into a question about a preemptive strike on Iran. It was a very, I would suggest, you're probably getting the toughest question first, is the good news for you, Governor Walz. But sadly, it's probably the question that most people saw, because I think most people watch the first half hour of these things.
Yeah, I would imagine you're right that most people watch the beginning of it. Look, it was genial. It was vice presidential in that, these things, a couple of my observations generally are, and we've talked about it, I think, is that, people talk about how the vice presidency is useless. What somebody once called it I think it was John Nance Garner called it, not more than a warm bucket of spit is how it was used.
I hadn't heard that quote.
And he was a vice president. Yeah. And so because you're just essentially a heartbeat away, and that's kind of all you are. But when you're running against the vice president, apparently they had to make every single decision in the entire 3.5 years of the Biden administration. So the Republicans are calling it the Harris administration, saying she did this, she did that, she did this. I would love to hear how people answer the question on the other side. For everything that you credit Donald Trump with, I guess you also give Mike Pence all the credit for that too, because the vice presidency, as we know, is not a very effective office. These are two, smart men. Clearly, J.D. Vance profited from being a Yale Law School student. He's a smooth talker. And I thought that their campaign was very clever, and that they took J.D. Vance in a way who has been, and I said this on Twitter, which is now called X. They took a rabid dog from the campaign trail and made him a puppy dog on the debate, which I thought was very smart, if in fact that was calculated, which I think everything is. I do agree with you, Mark, that Walz struggled. He got a tough question. He knew he was going to get tough questions. Iran bombed Israel on that very day. That's the question he's getting. But it's a nerve-wracking thing. He's one man knowing that millions of people are watching this debate. So he was a little nervous at the start. I do think he settled in. It settled into a pretty genial conversation, and I think the best part of it for Walz was toward the end of the debate. So I think you're right. There were probably fewer people watching, but perhaps there were. It was a consistent number, or almost consistent number, all the way through.
I mean, to the extent that there are viral moments, I thought the end, he did stick the landing with his talking about the election denialism. That was
That's
probably
true.
his best moment.
Yeah, and also in this day and age, we're accustomed to people watch the first half hour. In this day and age, you watch these things for days, so that moment goes beyond just whether you were watching in the linear way. So, I think that will be the clip that has the most legs. And then, of course, there are things that are going to be fact checked, and if those things are proven not to be true, those will have many legs as well.
There was a quality, and then I'll play you a clip, but there was a quality of geniality, we just spoke of it, that reminded you of sort of the civil political discourse of the past. But I can argue that J.D. Vance is an extreme political figure with an extreme, severe vision of America's future. Everything from continuing to take away women's reproductive freedoms to changing the very culture of America and moving toward a theocratic culture. Yet, because of his general manner, as you suggested, the strategy to sort of come in this way in which he represented a much more reasonable man. I mean, I thought if I had one word to describe his general aspect, it is reasonable. Gee,
Yeah.
he's much more reasonable than I thought he was. He's
Right.
not, but I thought he effectively transformed himself for that conversation. So my question is,
Yeah.
if you're Walls, and this goes against sort of the DNA of Walls, do you try to call him out? You say, you say that now, but the reality is you've been a jihadist on women's reproductive freedoms. You've talked about a federal abortion ban. You are lying right now, or you are misrepresenting what you've said before, however you want to reconstitute the word lie. Or is that just not possible in that environment?
Look, in a way, I think it's like it's difficult to do in that environment when you're not someone who is whose, I guess, comfort zone is in a debate, as Governor Walz has proven. I think that he was fine last night, and in the end, he kind of hit his stride. But I think he doesn't. This is not his forum. His forum is out there shaking hands and glad handing and talking to people. I think that there's something about J.D. Vance that is wholly inorganic, and so what he was last night is not what he is on the trail, is what I was saying earlier. But he is an amalgamation of all of that, right? So he is this person who can turn on the charm and be calm, but behind that is the person who on the campaign trail is saying these very caustic things, and it's hard to know which of those versions of that person are real, and is he contrived in a way that John Edwards often seemed contrived when he was a vice presidential running mate. I think that there is a realness to some vice presidents and candidates. I think of Dick Cheney. He was who he was, right? I think Mike Pence was who he was in terms of this sort of conservative figure. You look at Al Gore. That's what Al Gore was. But and Tim Walz similarly. But when you look at somebody like J.D. Vance, I think you're getting somebody who's not quite certain who he wants to be or portray. But he's very good at the smooth talking that we saw last night, and that's effective.
Yeah, in that environment, in a show, which is again what that was, that is,
Right.
there's a premium on that kind of thing. Albert, play maybe if you would please, what is it? This is a cut on immigration, I believe. I think it's a cut on immigration.
What about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor.
So
And
it
just
seemed like it was a debate at that moment about the bill and what he should, I think, have said and punctuated that response, which I thought was very solid generally. I think that Walz should have said, the bill that Trump blocked, did this. The bill, again, that your running mate, Donald Trump, blocked, did this. I felt that was what was lost in that. At some point, those are just words that are passing over me, Michael, unless I'm a policy wonk.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and not just that Trump blocked, that Republican senators, your colleague, Senator Vance, have said Trump blocked. It's not just me saying it.
Perfect. Good.
No,
yeah.
There are always you always want do-overs in improv, right? I mean, so if you only could have had it another shot at that question. I do think, though, it was a substantive conversation about a very important issue on the trail, but it didn't get the fire that it could have had, perhaps. And I'm sure that Vance was prepared to defend against that, but again, he kind of brushed it. They were able to brush aside a little bit of the controversies, both sides. Walz on Tiananmen Square, Walz on his National Guard, inflating part of his record there, and then Vance on having to cover for Trump and to talk about cats and dogs. They were able to skate by. That's why a 90-minute debate. These aren't the Lincoln Douglas debates. You can only do so much on each issue.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed as though they deferred to a kind of geniality. They wanted that to be the scent that we walked away from. I was like, wow, it's a lovely fragrance those two had.
Certainly Vance wanted that, and certainly the GOP did, because they've, and we've talked about this here on the show. It's like, what kind of campaign is he running? He's got to appeal to people. Trump does, people who are not. Who are turned off by him and his ways. He already has the people that don't care about that. And so this was the first time that I saw that campaign maybe make a play in that direction, which I think is smart politics. Whether it works with a vice president, it doesn't matter. But even as all this was happening, Trump was on social media in all caps talking about, I don't remember the verbatim of it, but really sort of saying things, talking about tampon Tim and that sort of thing. So it's
yeah. I mean, it's so crazy.
Yeah,
That you're right. Alongside a civil discourse, there is that insanity.
great background.
All right. So, in summary, give me two things. One, how you, at the end of it all, figure a winner, and at the end of it all, how you feel its potential impact will be felt.
Okay, I give the debate to Vance in the intangible way, and that he had a bar that was a little different to cross, and he was genial, and he was certainly better than he was at the convention, which is the last time the entire country watched him. So to that end, I think that he did more of what he had to do. I think Tim Walz getting through those 90 minutes was important for him. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. It's not his comfort zone. And whenever you have to play outside your comfort zone, it's difficult. And when he gets back on the trail this morning or last night ordering pizza and talking to people in a pizza place, things got better for Tim Walz. But on substance, I think that he actually won the debate. I think he's going to get the soundbite that comes out of this more favorably, which in these modern days is probably the way to win these debates. So I think to that end, he may have been a winner. I think it was a push, but if I were to lean to who got the most out of it in general, I would give it to Vance. Specifically, I would give it to Walz.
That's exactly my assessment. It's a push, but if I have to give it to anybody, I give it to Vance, just because of much of what you said. It was an image thing, and he did successfully reconstitute his image. Now, the second part of my question was its effect.
Well, I don't think anybody in America whose last name is not Vance or Walz goes into a booth on election day or early voting or fills out a mail-in ballot and thinks about the vice presidential debate.
Well, you don't think it tipped anybody?
I don't. I mean, I think it may have tipped people last night who watched it, but I don't think that's what you think about going forward. And what I mean is tipped the way we were tipped. Yeah, J.D. Vance did a little better than I thought he would do. Tim Walz was a little more nervous than I thought he was. That doesn't change my vote, right?
Sure.
This is an election about Donald Trump. It will be until every vote is cast.
Michael, appreciate you. We'll see you on Friday, and thanks for responding to the call to give us a couple of thoughts about the debate. Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
All right, Michael Shure, everybody. Right on. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.